storms in Colorado never came quietly. The first lightning bolt pierced the sky at the exact moment when Megan Cortez jolted awake from her own scream. In the darkness of her bedroom, she instinctively reached for a weapon that was no longer there. Her heart pounded like the echo of explosions she had heard thousands of times, but only rain drummed on the roof of her remote mountain cabin. "Just another dream," she whispered to herself, wiping sweat from her forehead with trembling fingers that had once been as steady as rock when she worked as a military medic in Middle Eastern hot zones. Now they betrayed her every night. Megan glanced at the digital clock, 3:47 a.m., a familiar time. Her brain seemed programmed to wake up exactly when their camp had suffered that last strike. Knowing she wouldn't be able to fall back asleep, she tossed aside the blanket and dropped her feet to the floor, feeling the cool wooden boards beneath her bare feet. Outside, the storm unfolded with a drama worthy of a Broadway production. The high-altitude Colorado air vibrated with thunder, and the wind raged among the pines surrounding her cabin. She had bought this place, 20 acres of forest and a small cabin on the edge of a national park, precisely because it was far from people. 6 months after her honorable discharge, social isolation remained the only anxiety medication that actually worked. Pulling on worn jeans and a flannel shirt, Megan automatically reached for the coffee maker. Few rituals remained in her life, but dawn coffee was sacrosanct. While the old coffee maker bubbled, she walked to the living room window, watching as lightning illuminated the majestic landscape of the Rocky Mountains. "It's going to be a rough day," she murmured, watching another lightning bolt split the sky and, almost simultaneously, hearing the muffled crack of a falling tree somewhere nearby. She instinctively flinched, her body tensing at the sound. 5 years after her last deployment, and her nerves were still raw, like live wires. When the first rays of sunlight began breaking through the clouds, Megan was already finishing her second cup of coffee. The storm was retreating, leaving behind a freshness that could only be breathed in high in the mountains. She pulled on heavy boots and an old army jacket, ready for her daily walk. These hikes had become her version of therapy, the only time when the noise in her head quieted enough to hear her own thoughts. Walking along the familiar path, Megan noticed the trail of destruction left by the storm. Broken branches littered the ground, and in one spot, a small tree had been completely uprooted. However, it was an unusual sound that caught her attention, a faint but desperate noise coming from beside the path. Megan stopped, listening. Her training had sharpened all her senses. There it was again, something between a hiss and a cry. She carefully moved toward the sound, pushing aside the damp undergrowth. Behind a juniper bush, she saw the source of the sound and froze. On the ground, pinned beneath a heavy pine branch, lay a golden eagle. The enormous bird, whose wingspan she estimated must be at least 6 feet, was helplessly struggling, trying to free itself. One wing was stretched at an unnatural angle, and unmistakable fear showed in its amber eyes. "Oh God," whispered Megan, instinctively shifting into medic mode. She knew eagles were protected species, and this one had obviously been injured by a falling tree during the storm. Her mind calculated options as if in a field hospital. Call the rangers? Try to help it herself? The bird looked seriously injured but still alive. Carefully approaching, Megan spoke in a quiet, soothing voice, the same one she had used for wounded soldiers. "Easy, big guy. I'm here to help. Don't make any sudden moves." The eagle responded with a loud cry and tried to attack her with its deadly talons, but the branch effectively immobilized it. Megan paused, assessing the situation. She had never treated birds before, especially predatory birds with talons capable of piercing skin straight through. Nevertheless, something in this bird's gaze touched her. Perhaps it was the pain she saw in those wild eyes, pain that reflected in her own heart every night. "We've both been through hell, haven't we?" she said quietly to the bird, slowly removing her jacket. "Let's try to get you out of here." Recalling fragments of information from survival training, Megan decided to use her jacket as an improvised blanket to protect herself and calm the bird. She approached the injured animal slowly, inch by inch, speaking in a low, monotone voice. "I'm not the enemy. We're both warriors, you understand? Just let me help you." The eagle didn't take its eyes off her, its breathing heavy and uneven. When she carefully draped the jacket over its upper body, the bird tensed but couldn't fight due to the branch holding it down. With the jacket protecting her from sharp talons and beak, Megan leaned in and assessed the situation. The branch was heavy, but not too heavy for her. The problem was how to lift it without causing more harm to the bird. "Here's what we'll do," she said, as if the bird could understand her plan. "I'll slowly lift the branch, and you try to get out. Just please don't try to rip my face off, okay?" Megan took a deep breath, prepared herself, and lifted the branch enough to create a gap. The eagle immediately sensed the change and tried to slide out, only to fall again with a painful cry. Now she could clearly see that one wing was seriously injured. Lowering the branch into a safe position, Megan stepped back, considering her next move. The bird needed professional help. She recalled a brochure she had seen in the local grocery store about a wildlife rehabilitation center somewhere nearby. "I'll have to take you with me," she told the eagle. "I don't think you'll like it, but the alternative is worse." Dropping her backpack, she pulled out a water bottle and took a few sips, preparing for the difficult task. The eagle watched her every move with a mixture of fear and, she thought, a glimmer of understanding. Nodding resolutely, Megan made her decision. "All right, friend, we'll do this together." She raised the branch again, higher this time, and quickly but carefully grabbed the bird by the body through the jacket, avoiding the damaged wing. The eagle screamed and struggled, but was too weakened to truly resist. "Hang in there, soldier," she whispered, pressing the large bird to her chest, feeling its frantic heartbeat through the fabric of her jacket. "We'll get you back in the air." The path back to her cabin seemed endless. Each step was careful, trying not to jostle the injured bird. By the time she reached her vehicle, an old Ford Ranger, the eagle seemed to have accepted its situation. Its struggle transformed into trembling. Placing the bird on the passenger seat, Megan quickly searched her phone for the rehabilitation center's number. As she waited for a connection, her gaze met the eagle's. "You will fly again," she promised. "I know something about recovering from injuries." When they answered on the other end of the line, Megan took a deep breath. "Yes, I have an injured golden eagle. Need help, urgently." She started the engine, and as she drove the winding mountain roads to the rehabilitation center, she couldn't help feeling that this morning marked something important. For the first time in many months, her head was quiet. For the first time in a very long time, she had a mission. Glancing at the injured bird beside her, she whispered, "We'll get through this together." The eagle watched her with its penetrating eyes, and Megan couldn't shake the feeling that on some deep level, it understood. The Rocky Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center looked more modest than Megan had imagined. A small complex consisting of a main building and several auxiliary structures was surrounded by tall pines, almost blending into the forest landscape. The only sign that this was indeed a center was a simple wooden plaque with a carved inscription and a faint image of a soaring eagle. Megan carefully pulled into the gravel parking lot, trying not to jostle the injured eagle in the passenger seat. The bird seemed to have fallen into a state of stupor, only occasionally blinking its amber eyes. She wasn't sure if this was a good sign. "We're here," she said quietly, more to herself than to the bird. "Hang in there." She had barely turned off the engine when a middle-aged woman in worn jeans and a green shirt with the center's embroidered logo ran out from the main building. Her gray hair was gathered in a practical ponytail, and her face, weathered and tanned, radiated energy that was felt even at a distance. "Are you the one who called about the eagle?" the woman asked, immediately approaching the passenger door. "I'm Dr. Ramona Wilson, Chief Veterinarian and Director of this facility." Megan nodded, walking around the car. "Yes, that's me, Megan Cortez. I found him during my morning walk. A broken branch had pinned him down." Dr. Wilson carefully opened the door, her eyes instantly assessing the bird's condition with professional speed. "I see you wrapped him up. Smart. Field medic skills," Megan replied, feeling unexpected satisfaction from this recognition. "I served in the Army." Something flashed in the veterinarian's eyes, understanding or perhaps recognition, but she quickly returned to the task at hand. "We need to move him to the hospital. I call my assistant." She pulled a radio from her pocket and briefly gave instructions. Within seconds, a young man appeared from behind the building with a transport cage and heavy gloves. "This is Tyler, our head technician," Wilson introduced. "He knows how to handle birds of prey." Tyler, a lanky guy with curly chestnut hair and a face abundantly dotted with freckles, nodded to Megan. "Ma'am, let's get this fellow out and examine him." With a skill that indicated years of practice, Tyler and Dr. Wilson carefully moved the eagle from the car into the transport cage. The bird weakly protested, but was clearly too weakened for real resistance. "Looks like a fracture in the right wing," Dr. Wilson murmured, carefully running a gloved hand over the feathers. "Possibly internal bleeding. We'll need an X-ray." Megan felt her pulse quicken. She knew these symptoms, had seen them in humans thousands of times. Will he survive? Dr. Wilson closed the cage and looked at her. Golden eagles are very resilient, but I won't lie to you. Wing damage for a bird can be as critical as losing a leg is for a human. We'll do everything possible. Megan felt unexpectedly attached to this wild creature's fate. It was irrational, she knew. It's just a bird, one of thousands. But something in its eyes, in its struggle, reminded her of everything. "Can I?" She hesitated, surprising herself. "Can I stay? Watch how the treatment goes?" Dr. Wilson raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Usually, we don't allow visitors to be present during procedures. It can stress the animals." "I'm a medic." Megan quickly corrected herself. "I know how to behave in an operating room." Tyler and Dr. Wilson exchanged glances. "We're always short-handed," Wilson said slowly. "If you really have medical training, ... "I do," Megan confirmed, feeling a sudden surge of energy. For the first time in many months, she felt something akin to confidence. "I've worked with injuries much more complex than this. Of course, not with birds, but..." "All right," Wilson nodded. "But you'll do exactly what I say. Even the slightest stress can be fatal for a bird in this condition." Megan nodded quickly. "Understood." Inside the main building, was a spacious lobby with information stands about local wildlife and a trail leading to a small natural exhibit. But Tyler and Dr. Wilson didn't stop, leading Megan through a side door to a well-lit room that resembled a mix between a veterinary clinic and a field hospital. A young woman with a long black braid was already working there, preparing instruments and turning on the X-ray machine. "Mia, this is Megan. She'll be assisting today, Dr. Wilson." Wilson introduced briefly. "Megan, Mia is our specialist in birds of prey." Mia nodded, her dark eyes quickly assessing Megan. "Good. You can wash your hands over there and put on these gloves. Dr. Wilson doesn't like to waste time." Dr. Wilson was already carefully removing the eagle from the cage while Tyler held the bird's body still. "Male. Adult. I'd say about 5 years old," she commented. "Weight below normal, but not critically." Megan quickly washed her hands and pulled on the heavy protective gloves, watching the process attentively. She felt a strange mixed feeling, professional interest as a medic, and deep personal concern for this wild creature. "Before we do the X-ray, we need to administer a mild sedative," Dr. Wilson explained, preparing a syringe. "Megan, can you help Tyler hold him?" The next 2 hours passed as if in a fog of intensive work. The X-ray confirmed a complex fracture of the humerus bone in the right wing. Additionally, there were minor injuries, bruises on the chest, minor bleeding in the wing's soft tissues, damaged feathers. "It's good you found him so quickly," Dr. Wilson said, carefully studying the X-rays. "A few more hours and he could have lost the wing." Megan felt unexpected relief. "So you can fix him? He'll fly again?" Doctor said. Wilson removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I won't promise what I can't guarantee. The fracture is complex. We need to insert pins, and then there will be a long period of rehabilitation. But this bird has a chance." "What kind of chance?" Megan insisted, recalling how she asked the same questions of military surgeons in Kandahar. 50-50, Wilson answered honestly. "But eagles are fighters. I've seen them recover from worse injuries." Megan nodded, looking at the bird, which now lay on the operating table, partially covered with sterile cloth, its majestic eyes closed under the effect of anesthesia. "I would call him a fighter," she said quietly. "Oh, so you've already given him a name?" Mia asked, preparing the surgical instruments. Megan shrugged, feeling slightly uncomfortable. "No, not yet." "How about Solomon?" Tyler suggested. "He looks wise." Dr. Wilson rolled her eyes. "Tyler, we don't name wild animals we hope to release back into the wild. You know the rules." "All animals receive identification numbers," Mia explained, noticing Megan's confusion. "This one will be Gaia 237. "Gaia?" Megan asked. "Golden Eagle adult male," Tyler explained. "But you do name them," Megan said quietly, noticing a brief exchange of glances between Mia and Tyler. Dr. Wilson sighed. "We officially don't have names for rehabilitants. Unofficially, well, people remain people. But let's focus on the surgery." The next hour was filled with delicate surgical work. Megan assisted, passing instruments, holding retractors, dabbing blood. It was strangely familiar, almost comforting, returning to medical procedures, even if the patient was entirely different. Dr. Wilson worked with a skill Megan couldn't help but admire. Her hands moved with clockwork precision as she installed tiny titanium pins in the damaged wing bone. "You've done this many times," Megan observed, passing another instrument. "Too many," Wilson replied, not taking her eyes off her work. "Most injuries are the result of human activity. Collisions with power lines, cars, lead poisoning from ammunition. But this was just an accident, Megan said. A storm, a falling tree. Yes, Wilson agreed. Nature can be cruel too, but it's usually balanced. Humans, not always. When the surgery was completed, the eagle was carefully moved to a special recovery enclosure. His wing was gently fixed in the correct position, and his eye was partially covered with a special bandage. "What's that bandage for?" Megan asked, watching as Mia carefully covered the bird's right eye. "It's a hood. It partially restricts vision to reduce stress," Mia explained. "Birds of prey are very visual creatures. Too many visual stimuli can overexcite them during recovery." Megan nodded, unexpectedly feeling a connection to this procedure. After returning home, she often closed the curtains in her cabin when the sounds and images of the outside world became too intense. Sometimes, darkness was the only thing that calmed her overloaded brain. "What now?" she asked when they left the hospital wing. Dr. Wilson glanced at her watch. "Now we wait. The next 48 hours will be critical. If he survives them without infection or rejection of the implants, his chances will improve significantly." "Can I help somehow?" The words escaped before Megan had time to think. It was strange, offering help when for months she hadn't even checked her mail. Dr. Wilson looked at her carefully, as if assessing something beyond what was said. "Actually, yes," she said slowly. "We're always short on volunteers, especially with medical training. If you're really interested, we could use your help caring for Gaia 237 during his recovery." Tyler, who was cleaning the instruments, turned around. "Seriously? You don't usually trust new volunteers to care for eagles?" "New volunteers don't usually have combat medical training and show such a natural talent for handling animals," Wilson replied, turning back to Megan. "What do you say? A few hours a week, observing the recovery process and helping with basic care." Megan hesitated. This would mean regular social interactions, disrupting her carefully constructed isolation. But when she thought about the eagle, his majestic eyes, his struggle, his will to live despite injury, she felt something she hadn't felt for months: purpose. "I'd like that," she said firmly. "I can come every day if needed." "Let's start with 3 days a week," Dr. Wilson suggested, exchanging a brief glance with Mia. "Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from 9 to noon?" "Works for me," Megan nodded. "Excellent." Dr. Wilson extended her hand. "Then welcome to our team, Megan. Mia will walk you through the volunteer registration process." Shaking the veterinarian's hand, Megan felt a strange tremor, as if something that had long been frozen inside her began to slowly thaw. Before leaving, she asked to look at the eagle one last time. The bird lay quietly, its breathing even but weak. The wing was carefully secured to the body, and the bandage partially covered his penetrating eyes. "See you soon," she said quietly, touching the aviary glass with her fingertips. "We'll both fight." On the way home, the heavy clouds over the Rocky Mountains finally dispersed, letting through the rays of the late spring sun. Megan pressed a button, lowering the window, letting fresh mountain air into her truck's cabin. For the first time in a very long time, she didn't turn on the radio to drown out the silence. For the first time in a long time, the silence seemed not hostile, but full of possibilities. And when she turned onto the winding road leading to her remote cabin, she was surprised to notice that she was humming a tune, an old song they sang during training, a song about never giving up, never leaving a comrade behind. "We'll get through this, soldier," she whispered, thinking about the eagle, and perhaps also a little about herself. "We'll both fly again." 2 days since the eagle surgery flew by for Megan in a strange state of anticipation. She repeatedly caught herself flipping through an old medical textbook pulled from a box in the garage, looking for any information about bird anatomy or fracture healing. Her laptop, which usually served only for occasional email checking, suddenly became a portal into the world of ornithology. She read scientific articles about golden eagles, their migration routes, diet, and behavior. On Monday, Megan arrived at the rehabilitation center 20 minutes earlier than the appointed time. Parking her pickup, she noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. Social anxiety? Perhaps, but also something like anticipation. It was a forgotten feeling, almost alien, after months of emotional numbness. "You're early," Mia noted, greeting her on the porch with a steaming cup in her hands. Her long black braid was neatly plaited, and her uniform showed fresh stains, apparently from cleaning enclosures. "Wanted to find out how he's doing," Megan replied, mimicking Mia's casual tone. Mia smiled, something knowing flashing in her eyes. They always have that effect, especially the majestic birds. Something about them touches people on a deep level. She gestured for Megan to come inside. "Gaia 237 is holding up. Dr. Wilson has already checked on him twice today. No signs of infection. He even ate a little last night." The relief Megan felt was unexpectedly strong, as if someone had lifted an invisible burden from her shoulders. "I've prepared a volunteer kit for you," Mia continued, leading her down the corridor to a small break room. "It has all the necessary forms, schedule, and of course, our favorite t-shirt." On the table lay a folded green t-shirt with the center's logo and a stack of papers. Megan picked up the shirt, feeling the soft, worn fabric. Like joining a new team, it evoked mixed feelings, comfort from belonging and anxiety from responsibilities. "Gaia 237, she murmured, scanning the documents. "This name isn't very convenient." Mia shrugged, but the corners of her lips twitched in a barely noticeable smile. "Officially, we don't give names to rehabilitants, as Dr. Wilson said. But unofficially..." "Unofficially?" Megan prompted. "Tyler calls him Solomon. I lean toward Hercules. He's extraordinarily strong considering his injuries." Mia smiled, now openly. "Dr. Wilson, though she won't admit it, I've heard her call him stoic when she thinks no one is listening." "And what would you call him?" Mia asked, studying Megan. Megan thought, recalling the eagle's penetrating gaze, his struggle, his dignity in suffering. "Warrior," she replied. "I would call him Warrior." Mia nodded with respect. "Fitting. His life was a struggle long before meeting you. Golden eagles have the highest nestling mortality rate among birds of prey. Only the strongest survive." "Like war," Megan said quietly. "Yes," Mia looked at her attentively. "Your experience as a military medic is probably more connected to this work than one might think." Before Megan could respond, Tyler entered, carrying a box of medications. "Oh good, you're already here. Dr. Wilson wants us to conduct training on handling and feeding." The next few hours were filled with intensive learning. Megan studied protocols for caring for birds of prey, safe handling techniques, how to read signs of stress, feeding methods. It was fascinating, and she noticed that her mind, which for months had been as if wrapped in cotton, was now sharp and attentive. "You learn quickly," Dr. Wilson praised, watching as Megan skillfully prepared a mixture for feeding birds. "Most newcomers need weeks to feel comfortable with such procedures." "I'm used to working under stress," Megan replied, trying to sound casual, though the praise warmed her. How long had it been since she heard approval of her skills? "I noticed," Wilson nodded. "Ready to see your patient?" Megan's heart raced. More than ready. The hospital wing was quiet, only the hum of medical equipment breaking the silence. They passed several occupied enclosures, an owl with a damaged eye, a hawk with a broken leg, 2 sick seagulls. But Megan barely noticed them, focused on the enclosure at the end of the room. The eagle lay on a specially constructed platform that supported him in a comfortable position. His wing was still secured, and his eye was partially covered with a bandage. But at their approach, he turned his head, and Megan felt a tremor when his penetrating gaze met hers. "He looks better," she said, examining the color of his beak, posture, general appearance. "He's fighting," Dr. Wilson agreed. "But we're still not out of the woods. It takes weeks to understand if he'll ever be able to fly again." "And if he can't?" Megan asked quietly, not taking her eyes off the bird. Dr. Wilson sighed. "Then we'll have a difficult decision. We try not to keep animals in captivity if they can't be released back into the wild. But there are educated..." When the procedure was completed, Dr. Wilson made some notes on her tablet. "Perfect. Megan, you handle him naturally. Next time, you'll insert the tube and I'll assist." Megan felt a surge of pride that was both familiar and nostalgic. Once she had been an expert, the person people turned to when decisive action and steady hands were needed. Then came that last mission, and her confidence shattered like glass under an explosion. "Thank you for the trust," she replied. The rest of the morning was spent learning further protocols, how to keep records, how to assess progress, how to recognize early signs of problems. As noon approached, Megan unexpectedly found herself reluctant to leave the center. "You know," Dr. Wilson said, removing her lab coat, "we usually have lunch together on the terrace. Nothing special, just sandwiches and conversation. You could join us if you'd like." Megan's first instinct was to decline. Social interactions, especially unstructured ones like lunch, were what she had carefully avoided for months. But something about these people, their mission, this place, made her hesitate. I didn't bring lunch," she replied, looking for an excuse. Mia, who was just entering the room, smiled. "We always have extra sandwiches. Tyler prepares enough for an army." Hesitating for another moment, Megan finally nodded. "Okay, sounds good." The terrace turned out to be a simple wooden deck behind the main building, with a long table and a view of the mountain slope covered with pines. Tyler had already laid out the food, a pile of sandwiches, fruits, and homemade cookies. "You make a wonderful sandwich, Mr. Jenkins," Mia joked, taking one and settling at the table. "Years of practice," he smiled, proudly surveying his creation. "My mom ran a cafe in Denver. I grew up helping her in the kitchen." "And how did you get into wildlife rehabilitation?" Megan asked, sitting down and taking a sandwich that looked like a perfectly balanced combination of bread, cheese, vegetables, and meat. "Classic story," Tyler shrugged. "Found an injured falcon in the park when I was a teenager. Took it to a rehabilitation center and just fell in love with these birds. Studied wildlife biology in college and ended up here." "And you, Mia?" Megan continued, feeling an unexpected curiosity about these people. "My family is from the Navajo tribe," Mia replied. "Eagles have special significance in our culture. They are messengers between people and the sky. I studied veterinary medicine to preserve them for future generations." "And you, Dr. Wilson?" Megan asked, turning to the older woman. Dr. Wilson was playing with a tomato in her salad. "Oh, I'm an old dinosaur. I was a veterinary surgeon in San Diego, worked with exotic animals at the zoo. But the dream was always to return closer to nature, to do something that has a direct impact." Her eyes met Megan's. "Like you, I assume." Megan felt something tighten in her chest. "I don't think the comparison is appropriate. You save lives. She faltered, suddenly envisioning a sandy hospital, tents filled with the wounded, her hands trying to stop the bleeding of a young soldier who no longer moved. "You saved lives too," Dr. Wilson said gently, "and obviously did it well." "Not always well enough," Megan almost whispered, looking away to the pine forest. A silence fell over the table, but not an uncomfortable one. Rather, it was a silence of understanding, of space provided for emotions without judgment. "You know why I love wildlife rehabilitation?" Dr. Wilson finally asked. "Because each case reminds me that healing is never a straight path. It's zigzagging, with ups and downs, with days of progress and days of regression. But if we don't give up—" She paused, looking at Megan with a meaningful gaze. "Amazing things can happen." Tyler, sensing the tension of the moment, deftly changed the subject. "So, Megan, have you lived in our area long? I haven't seen you before, and this isn't such a big town." "About 6 months," she replied, grateful for the rescue. "Bought a cabin on the north side of the mountain. 20 acres, mostly forest." "Wow, you're a recluse," Tyler joked, "though I understand the appeal. Sometimes I think I get along better with birds than with people." "I'm familiar with that feeling," Megan quietly admitted. Lunch continued with lighter topics: local news, weather forecast, the latest funny antics of a raccoon that constantly tried to break into the food storage. And though Megan listened more than she spoke, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely disconnected from the world. When it was time to say goodbye, Dr. Wilson walked with her to her car. "You did well today," she said. "Are you sure you only want to come 3 days a week? You could consider full-time if you're interested." Megan was surprised by the offer. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Dr. Wilson nodded understandingly. "Of course, just know that the offer is open. We're consistently short-handed, especially with your skills." On the way back home, Megan passed a steep slope that offered a stunning view of the valley below and the mountains in the distance. She stopped at the lookout point, got out of the car, and took a deep breath of the mountain air. The sky above her was boundless, blue, with a few circling birds, perhaps hawks or even eagles. Free, strong, in their element. "You'll be there too," she whispered, thinking of Gaia 237, of Warrior. "I promise." And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in long months, she felt a tiny spark of hope, not just for the bird, perhaps also for herself. Returning to her car, she did something she hadn't done since returning home. She turned on the radio, not to drown out the silence, but to listen to music. And as she drove the winding road to her cabin, she softly hummed along, her fingers tapping the rhythm on the steering wheel. Small, tiny steps back to the life she once knew. In the following weeks, Megan's life took on a new rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the rehabilitation center. Tuesday, Thursday, household chores, long walks in the forest, reading about birds of prey. Weekends, something new. She started visiting the small farmers market in town, where she bought fresh produce and exchanged polite nods with locals. Small steps, but meaningful ones. This Wednesday, she arrived at the center, as always, precisely at 9, with a thermos of homemade coffee and a bag of freshly baked muffins, bought at the gas station on the way. This had become her tradition, a small contribution to the team's shared breakfasts. "You're saving my life," sighed Tyler, eagerly grabbing a muffin as Megan entered the break room. This morning, I barely had time to shower, let alone have breakfast. Rough night? She asked, pouring coffee into mugs. Mia called me at 2 in the morning. We have a new admission, a falcon with severe poisoning. Looks like it swallowed a poisoned rodent. Tyler rubbed his eyes. Dr. Wilson spent 2 hours flushing its stomach. Is she with him now? No, with our warrior. Today's an important day. Megan's heart skipped a beat. Over 3 weeks, the eagle had shown impressive signs of recovery. The wound was healing cleanly. The bone was beginning to fuse, and his appetite had returned with such force that Mia jokingly complained about the meat expenses. Are they removing the fixation? Megan asked, already knowing the answer. They had discussed this last week. The time was approaching to check the wing's mobility, the first real test of whether Warrior would ever fly again. Partial removal, Tyler nodded. She wants you to be present. You're his favorite human. Megan didn't respond, but the words struck deeper than she could admit. At the end of the day, she lingered by Warrior's enclosure longer than usual. The bird approached closer to the glass wall, watching her with his penetrating gaze. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. "Should I accept the offer? It means seeing your stubborn bird face daily." The eagle blinked, and for a moment, Megan almost believed he nodded. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "I'm talking to a bird about a life decision." But as she walked toward the exit, a response was already forming in her heart. On the way home, she didn't take her usual route, but turned onto a side road leading to a lookout point high above the valley. She got out of the car and approached the edge, looking at the sky where 2 birds of prey, perhaps hawks or falcons, were performing their aerial dance. For 6 months, she had tried to forget, tried to become invisible to the world and to herself. 6 months in her own cage, which no one saw except her. And now there was an injured eagle, fighting every day for his right to fly again. A team of people who had accepted her without asking too many questions. And an opportunity, a path back, not to who she was, but to who she could become. Megan pulled out her phone and looked at the one contact she hadn't communicated with since moving to the cabin. Dr. Phelps, therapist. Her finger hovered over the screen for a long moment. "Step by step," she whispered, an echo of the words she said daily to Warrior when working with his damaged wing. Step by step. And she pressed the call button. The next morning, Megan arrived at the center at 8:30, half an hour before the start of the workday. Dr. Wilson was already there, checking on patients with a cup of tea in hand. "Good morning," Megan said. "I accept your offer. When can I start?" Dr. Wilson smiled as if she had long known the answer. "How about right now? We have a physical therapy program to develop." And as the sun rose over the Rocky Mountains, illuminating the rehabilitation center with soft morning light, Megan Cortez began a new chapter of her life. A chapter that unexpectedly appeared thanks to an injured eagle and his fight for the sky. When June arrived, summer fully embraced the Rocky Mountains. The forests surrounding the rehabilitation center filled with lush greenery, and the air with the scent of sun-warmed pine. For Megan, the past 4 weeks had flown by in the rhythm of new work and gradual changes. Every morning, her workday began with rounds of patients, but the first stop was always Warrior. During this time, the eagle had moved from the hospital wing to a special rehabilitation enclosure, a tall structure with a high ceiling where birds could gradually restore their mobility in a protected environment. "Good morning, winged bandit," Megan greeted, opening the service doors of the enclosure. Following protocol, she was dressed in a protective vest and wore thick leather gloves. "Ready for your daily drill?" The eagle, sitting on a low perch, turned his head with majestic slowness. Over weeks of physical therapy, his behavior had changed. He had become stronger, more confident, but also more impatient with the constraints of captivity. "I see you're in a fighting mood," she smiled, noticing how he impatiently shifted his talons. "That's good. Today is a special day for us." Megan followed a strict routine during physical therapy sessions. First, carefully drape a special cloth over the bird's head to reduce stress. Then delicately but firmly take him in a hold. She remembered all of Mia's lessons. Never show fear. These birds can sense it like a smell. Today, however, Warrior was particularly restless, barely allowing himself to be caught. "Hey, what's going on?" she murmured, carefully holding him. "We've been doing this for weeks. No time for scenes." But when she began the first passive movements of the wing, the eagle suddenly jerked and broke free from her grasp, flying to the opposite end of the enclosure, where he perched on the highest available perch. "This has never happened before," Megan said in surprise, calling for backup on the radio. "Tyler, can you come to rehabilitation enclosure number 3? Warrior's not in the mood for therapy today." "On my way," Tyler's voice responded. "Dr. Wilson will be there too. She wants to see him in action." A few minutes later, they both entered the enclosure, carefully closing the door behind them. "He looks excited," Dr. Wilson observed, watching as the eagle nervously shifted from foot to foot on the perch. "He's never been this restless," Megan replied. "Usually, he allows himself to be caught for exercises." Dr. Wilson thoughtfully tapped her finger on her chin. "How mobile has his wing become?" "Almost full range with passive movements, and he's extending it himself more and more often." Dr. Wilson looked at the eagle with that particular penetrating gaze that Megan had learned to recognize as a sign that the veterinarian was contemplating something. "Tyler, bring me the long perch with the soft cover, and tell Mia to prepare the larger enclosure. The one we use for pre-release trials." Tyler raised his eyebrows in surprise, but nodded and left. Megan looked at Dr. Wilson. "You think he's ready for more space? We had planned at least 2 more weeks of physical therapy before that." "Plans are good, but sometimes our patients have their own ideas," Wilson smiled. "Look at him. This isn't restlessness from pain or fear. It's impatience. He feels his wings strengthening, and he wants to try using it." Megan looked at the eagle with a new perspective. Indeed, in his posture, in the way he extended both wings, periodically shaking them, there was not aggression, but energy that needed an outlet. "We risk regression if we allow active movements this early," she cautiously noted, recalling the rehabilitation protocols she had studied. "We also risk delaying his psychological recovery if we restrict him too long," Dr. Wilson replied. "Rehabilitation is always a balance between caution and progress." Tyler returned with a long perch that had a soft pad at the end. "Mia is preparing the enclosure. What are we doing?" "Encouraging his first real flight," Dr. Wilson replied, taking the perch. "Megan, are you ready to try something new?" Megan's heart beat faster. The first flight. The moment of truth that would determine if Warrior could ever return to the wild. "Absolutely ready," she nodded. "Good." Dr. Wilson took the perch and slowly raised it to the eagle's level. "I'll encourage him to fly from perch to perch. The distance is very short, but this will be his first attempt at active flight. Be ready to catch him if he falls." Megan nodded, spreading her arms and focusing on Warrior. He didn't take his eyes off her, and for a moment, It seemed to her that he was looking for confidence in her, permission to try. "Go on, soldier," she whispered. "Show us what you can do." Dr. Wilson carefully brought the perch closer to the eagle, but he didn't move. Then she gently tapped his perch, making him shift his balance. He spread his wings, seeking equilibrium. "Come on, Gaia 237, Dr. Wilson calmly encouraged. "One small jump." Warrior looked at the offered perch, then at Megan, then at Tyler standing by the door. Finally, he looked at Megan again, and at that moment, she did something that was against all protocols. She removed her protective glove and extended her bare hand to him. "I believe in you," she said. Dr. Wilson gave her a surprised look, but said nothing. As an experienced veterinarian, she knew that at this moment, the connection between bird and human was more important than strict adherence to rules. Warrior looked at Megan for another moment, and then suddenly, with one confident movement, he jumped from the perch, extending both wings. For one terrifying moment, it seemed he was falling, his injured wing trembling from the unusual load. But then he confidently grasped Dr. Wilson's perch with his talons, maintaining his balance, wings still extended in a mighty span. "Don't talk nonsense," Megan waved him off, though she felt warmth at the thought. "Warrior tolerates me because I bring food. He would treat anyone the same way." "Not true, and you know it." Tyler finished his coffee in one gulp. "He reacts to you differently. Even Dr. Wilson noticed, and she always insists on the absence of attachment between rehabilitants and caregivers." Megan raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue further. She couldn't deny that she felt a special connection with the eagle. Every time she entered the room where his enclosure was located, the bird would turn his head, fixing his penetrating gaze on her. And when she spoke to him, which she believed others didn't notice, he would tilt his head as if listening and understanding. "Let's go," she said, finishing her own coffee. "Let's not keep them waiting." "He did it," Tyler exhaled. "Look, he used both wings." Megan felt tears welling in her eyes. It was just a small jump, not even a full flight, but it was a victory, the first of many that the eagle needed to return to the sky. "And this is just the beginning," Dr. Wilson said quietly, carefully watching as the eagle folded his wings while standing on the perch. "From now on, we'll intensify his rehabilitation program. Larger enclosure, more opportunities for flight." They carefully moved the eagle to the larger enclosure, a spacious fenced area with various levels of perches, resting places, and even a small artificial stream. This was the penultimate stop before release into the wild, a place where birds learn to be wild again. Over the next few hours, Megan and Tyler set up a new feeding system that would encourage the eagle to fly to obtain food. Dr. Wilson and Mia developed new monitoring protocols. "We'll be monitoring his flight activity around the clock," Dr. Wilson explained, showing Megan the camera system. "But I want you to continue being his primary caregiver. Now your role is to observe more and intervene less." "That will be hard," Megan admitted. "I'm used to daily exercises to direct interaction." Dr. Wilson placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's part of the process, not just for him, but for you too. Letting go, allowing him to regain independence." The goal of rehabilitation has always been a return to the wild. There was something in Dr. Wilson's words that made Megan wonder if she was talking only about the bird. In the evening, when the rest of the team had gone home, Megan lingered by Warrior's new enclosure. The eagle sat on the highest perch, silhouetted against the sunset, his profile standing out against the pink-purple sky. "Today you surprised us," she said quietly through the mesh. "Keep it up, and soon you'll be out there." She fell silent, not sure whether to be happy or sad at the thought. Over these weeks, Warrior had become the center of her new life, his daily struggle inspiring her own. Driving home, Megan recalled yesterday's session with her therapist, the first in 6 months. Dr. Phelps, a gray-haired woman with penetrating, kind eyes, had asked her a simple but difficult question. "What changed? Why did you decide to start therapy again right now?" Megan had thought long before answering. "I met someone who reminded me that wounds heal, even the deepest ones." And when Dr. Phelps asked who this person was, Megan laughed and replied, "It's not a person, it's an eagle." Now, driving the winding mountain roads to her cabin, Megan thought about the parallels between their journeys. Warrior was recovering his strength, his purpose and essence, the ability to fly. And she was trying to remember how to be part of the world, how to allow herself to care again, how to trust her abilities. Arriving home, Megan did something she hadn't done in months. She called her older sister Samantha in Chicago. "Megan?" Her sister's voice was a mixture of shock and joy. "Is it really you?" "Hi, Sam," Megan replied, surprised at how emotional it was to hear her sister's voice. "Yes, it's me. Sorry I haven't called for so long." "Oh God, I was so worried. Are you okay? Are you still in that cabin in the mountains?" "Yes, I'm still here. And I'm not okay, but I'm getting better," Megan answered honestly. "I'm working at a wildlife rehabilitation center, helping injured birds return to the sky." There was a long pause, and then Samantha laughed softly. "That's so like you. Even while running from the world, you find someone to save." The conversation lasted almost an hour. Megan told her about the center, about Warrior, about Dr. Wilson and the team. She didn't touch on the deep wounds she was learning to heal, but her sister seemed to understand. "You know, I could come visit," Samantha suggested at the end. "If you're ready, no pressure." 6 months ago, the mere thought would have sent Megan into a panic. But now, "I'd like that," she replied. "Maybe in a few weeks. I'll show you the center and Warrior." "Warrior?" Samantha asked in surprise. "My eagle," Megan explained with a slight smile. Long story. After the call, Megan went out to the small terrace of her cabin and sat in a rocking chair, looking at the night sky studded with stars. In such moments, the mountains seemed endless, and human problems minuscule. But today, for the first time in a long time, this perspective didn't bring her a terrible sense of her own insignificance. Instead, she felt a connection with the sky, with the mountains, with the wild eagle fighting for his place in this majestic space. "One day at a time," she whispered to the starry sky. "One flight at a time." And when the night breeze blew through the pines, she thought she heard a response. The rustle of wings, a promise of a future filled with possibilities and hope. The hospital wing of the center looked different than on that first day. Now Megan knew the story of each patient, from the one-eyed owl named Warren, unofficially of course, to the young hawk found tangled in fishing line. But her gaze, as always, first sought out Warrior. Dr. Wilson and Mia stood by his enclosure, quietly discussing something and taking notes. "Ah, here's our chief caregiver," Dr. Wilson smiled, seeing Megan. "We were just discussing our patient's progress." "And how is he?" Megan asked, Approaching the enclosure, Warrior was sitting more vertically than before, a good sign. His eyes, now fully open without the bandage, looked directly at her with an intensity that still impressed Megan. "Amazing," Dr. Wilson admitted. "The bone has healed better than I hoped. The X-ray showed good callus formation, and the soft tissues have completely healed." "So he'll be able to fly?" Megan couldn't hide the hope in her voice. "That's what we're going to try to figure out today." Mia stepped forward with a set of tools. "We'll remove part of the fixation and check passive mobility. This will help us assess how damaged the muscles and tendons are." Dr. Wilson handed Megan thick leather gloves. "You'll help hold him. He's calmest with you." The procedure was delicate and tense. Megan carefully wrapped the eagle in a special wrap that restricted his movements, leaving access to the damaged wing. Warrior seemed to understand what was happening. He was more tense than usual, but didn't resist when Megan gently held him. "Good boy," she whispered to him. "Just let us help. We're here for you." The bird watched her with an unwavering gaze that conveyed a mixture of wildness and, she thought, trust. "Strange," Dr. Wilson murmured, carefully removing the bandage. "Usually, golden eagles are incredibly aggressive during such procedures, even after weeks of rehabilitation. But he's special," Megan replied quietly. The eagle's wing, now free from support, looked slightly thinner than the healthy one, but overall undamaged. Dr. Wilson carefully began to move it, checking each joint, each muscle. "Tension here," she pointed to an area near the shoulder, "and here, near the elbow joint, but much better than I expected." Mia quickly recorded everything on a tablet, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Range of motion approximately 60% of normal. That's impressive progress for 3 weeks. What does this mean for his chances of returning to the wild?" Megan asked, not taking her eyes off the bird. "It's too early to say for certain," Dr. Wilson replied, returning the wing to a neutral position. "But I'm more optimistic than I was. If physical therapy goes well, he could regain up to 80 to 90% function. That might be enough." Megan felt a wave of joy, almost dizzying in its intensity. She smiled at the eagle, holding back tears she hadn't expected. "Hear that, soldier? You'll return to the sky." After the examination was completed, the wing was placed in a new, lighter fixation that allowed more movement, and Warrior was returned to his enclosure. "Now the real work begins," Dr. Wilson explained, washing her hands. "We need to develop a physical therapy program. Passive movements at first, then gradually increasing activity." "Like with humans after injuries," Megan nodded. "Very similar," Dr. Wilson agreed. "And as with humans, recovery has not only a physical, but also a psychological aspect. He must learn to trust his wing again." Megan nodded, understanding deeper than she could express. She too knew what it was like, not trusting your own body, your own mind after trauma. "I want you to be responsible for his physical therapy," Dr. Wilson suddenly said. "Under my supervision, of course, but daily sessions monitoring progress." Megan froze. "Daily? I only come 3 times a week." Dr. Wilson gave her an evaluating look. "I'm offering you an official position, Megan. Part-time, rehabilitation assistant, 30 hours a week with pay." This offer was so unexpected that Megan literally took a step back. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Tyler interjected, approaching. "We need your help, and you get along wonderfully with the birds, especially with this particular stubborn beauty." Megan glanced at Warrior, who seemed to be watching the conversation attentively. The thought of working with him daily, of observing his progress step by step, to full recovery. It was more appealing than she was ready to admit. What about my training? I'm not an ornithologist or a veterinarian. We have me and Mia for complex medical issues, Dr. Wilson replied. Your experience as a military medic is more than sufficient for rehabilitation work. Besides, Tyler doesn't have formal veterinary education, but he's the best technician I've ever worked with. Tyler theatrically bowed. Megan took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to refuse, to retreat back to the safe isolation of her cabin. But another part, the part that had been slowly awakening during these weeks, reached for the opportunity. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Dr. Wilson nodded. But not for too long. Our friend there needs consistent therapy, starting tomorrow. The rest of the day passed in the usual routine, feeding patients, cleaning enclosures, helping with medications. But Megan's mind was occupied with a decision that had risen before her like a wall. During lunch, which she now regularly shared with the team, she was quieter than usual. Mia, always sensitive to others' moods, sat next to her at the secluded end of the table. Accepting change is always scary, she said quietly, even if the change is for the better. Megan looked up. Who said I was scared? Mia smiled lightly. Your face. You have the same expression as our hawks when we first show them new food, a mixture of curiosity and complete panic. Megan couldn't suppress a chuckle. Is it that obvious? Only to those who know where to look. Mia placed her hand on the table, close but not touching Megan's. You know, in my culture, we believe that healing often comes through serving others. By helping these birds, you're also helping yourself. July brought heat to the Colorado mountains. Each morning, Megan woke before sunrise to avoid the hottest hours of the day during her runs. This habit, which she had restored only a month ago, had now become an integral part of her daily routine. 5 kilometers on steep trails to meet the new day with a good dose of endorphins and a clear head. Today, Tuesday, it was her turn to open the center. On the way, she stopped at a small bakery in town, opened by a retired couple from New York who had moved here in search of peace, as they had told her. Megan bought cinnamon rolls for the entire team, another tradition that had formed over the past weeks. Good morning, Dr. Cortez, greeted Jose, a new volunteer student from the veterinary college who was interning at the center during the summer. All patients are in stable condition. I've already done the morning check. Jose, I've asked you to call me just Megan, she smiled, handing him the bag of rolls. And thanks for the check. Is Warrior also stable? The young man nodded, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. Oh yes. Actually, I wanted to show you the recordings from the night cameras. He flew several times from perch to perch. The progress is impressive. Megan felt a familiar surge of pride and joy. Over the past 3 weeks, Warrior had taken a huge step in his rehabilitation. From simple flights between close perches, he had moved to full-fledged short flights around the enclosure. His wing, though not fully restored, was gaining more strength each day. She quickly went to the room with monitors to review the night recordings. Indeed, it was clearly visible how Warrior confidently flew across the enclosure, stopping at different levels of perches, testing his wings, his strength. But today, she climbed to the top and got out of the car. The wind here was stronger, playful, tugging at her hair and clothes. The sun was already descending toward the horizon, painting the rocky peaks in gold and purple hues. Megan took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs. Then she took out her phone and dialed a number. Regional Wildlife Conservation Department, David Santiago speaking. A clear male voice answered. Mr. Santiago, my name is Megan Cortez. Dr. Ramona Wilson may have mentioned me. I'm calling about the position in the Rapid Response Program. When the call ended, Megan stood at the summit, watching as the first stars appeared in the sky. In 2 weeks, Warrior would be there among them, part of the sky again. And she would also take her next step, a new career path, new service, new life. One flight at a time, she whispered to the evening wind, and it seemed to her that the mountains responded with the rustle of pines supporting her decision. In complete darkness, she returned to her car and drove to the cabin, where another task awaited. She needed to write a letter to her sister, confirming her visit in a week. For the first time in more than 6 months, Megan would open the doors of her home to family. And although the thought still caused anxiety, now under the fear was a solid foundation of confidence. She was healing, just like her eagle, and soon they would both be ready for new heights. Wonderful, she whispered. He understands that he'll soon be free. Megan? Dr. Wilson's voice came from the doorway. I was hoping to catch you here. Can we talk in my office? Something in the veterinarian's tone made Megan tense. Of course. Is everything okay? Dr. Wilson simply nodded and gestured for her to follow. The center director's office resembled a naturalist's laboratory more than an office. The walls were hung with images of various bird anatomies. Shelves were stacked with books, and tables were filled with feather samples, nests, and other wildlife artifacts. Please, sit, Dr. Wilson pointed to a chair. While she settled behind her paper-laden desk, I wanted to talk to you about 2 things. The first concerns Warrior. Is something wrong with him? Megan immediately became anxious. On the contrary, Dr. Wilson smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. His progress is even better than we hoped. The latest X-rays confirm that the bone has completely fused. Muscles have regained over 80% strength. He's flying excellently in the enclosure. That's wonderful, Megan exhaled with relief, but then met Dr. Wilson's gaze. But there's a but, isn't there? Time, Megan, the veterinarian replied gently. It's time to release him back into the wild. Although this news wasn't unexpected, Megan knew this day was approaching. She still felt something tighten in her chest. How soon? She asked, trying to maintain a professional tone. We're planning the release in 2 weeks, Dr. Wilson replied, carefully watching her reaction. We'll prepare a GPS tracker to monitor his first months in the wild. And of course, we'll release him in a suitable location where there's a stable golden eagle population. Megan slowly nodded, processing the information. 2 weeks. What can I do to help with the preparation? That's the second thing I wanted to talk about. Dr. Wilson leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. I want you to lead the release project. Me? Megan was surprised. But usually you or Mia handle this as the raptor specialist. Yes, Dr. Wilson agreed. But in this case, I believe it should be you. You've worked with Warrior from day one. You've guided him through every stage of rehabilitation. And most importantly, there's a connection between you that I've rarely seen between a caregiver and a rehabilitant. Megan felt her throat tighten with emotion. I don't know what to say. It's a great honor. It won't be easy, Dr. Wilson warned. Managing a release isn't just the technical side of things, but also the emotional. You need to be ready to let go. I understand, Megan nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was truly ready for this. There's one more thing, Dr. Wilson continued. I received a request from the Regional Wildlife Conservation Department. They're looking for someone with medical experience for a new rapid response program for wildlife injuries. It would be a permanent position, full-time. Megan froze, trying to process this information. "And you recommended me?" "I told them I know the perfect candidate, Dr. Wilson." Wilson nodded. "But the decision is yours. This would be the next step in your career in this field, if that's what you want. Full-time, permanent job, next step." These words resonated in Megan's head like bells. A decision that 6 months ago seemed impossible now stood before her, real and attainable. "I need to think about it," she finally replied. "Of course," Dr. Wilson nodded. "You have time. Now, let's focus on preparing Warrior for his big day." The rest of the day passed in the center's usual routine, but Megan's thoughts were far away. She mechanically performed her duties, often stopping by Warrior's enclosure, watching as he moved confidently within his limited space. During the lunch break, she went to her favorite spot, a small clearing behind the center where a simple bench had been installed. From here, there was a magnificent view of the valley below and the mountains in the distance. "Mind if I join you?" Mia asked, approaching with a lunchbox. "Of course." Megan moved over, making room. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes until Mia spoke. "Dr. Wilson told me about the release and about the job offer." Megan nodded, examining her sandwich. "I don't know what to do, Mia." "About which part?" Mia asked gently. "The release or the job?" "Both," Megan sighed. "The release? I know it's right. That's the goal of all our work. But you've grown attached to him," Mia finished. "It's natural. Everyone who works in rehabilitation goes through this, especially with their first patient." "It's not just attachment," Megan said slowly, trying to articulate complex feelings. "Warrior, he's become a symbol for me. His struggle, his progress, his path to healing. It mirrored my own journey." Mia nodded, her dark eyes full of understanding. "In my culture, we believe that animals often come into our lives as teachers. They appear exactly when we need what they can teach." "And what has Warrior taught me?" Megan asked quietly. "You tell me," Mia smiled. Megan thought, looking at the expanse of mountains before them. "Perhaps that a broken wing doesn't mean the end of flight, that there is another life after trauma." "A powerful lesson," Mia nodded. "And perhaps it's time for the next lesson, how to let go and move forward." These words resonated deeper than Megan was ready to admit. She was thinking not only about the eagle, but also about her own past, about traumas and memories that had held her captive for so long. "As for the job," Mia continued after a pause, "I think you already know the answer. I see how you're flourishing here, Megan, how you're returning to life, just like your patient." "Really?" Megan turned to her. "Of course." Mia gently squeezed her hand. "When you first came here, you were like a shadow. Now you shine, and you're a wonderful rehabilitator, born for it." Returning to the center, Megan went straight to the large enclosure. Warrior sat on the highest perch, watching her with his penetrating eyes. "Hello, friend," she said quietly through the mesh. "I have news for you. In 2 weeks, you're going home, back to the sky, where you belong." The eagle tilted his head as if understanding the significance of her words. "I've been planning your rehabilitation from day one," she continued. "But I didn't think about what would happen when you recovered. That's my mistake, focusing on the process and forgetting about the goal." The bird jumped to a lower perch, closer to her, spreading his wings in a demonstration of strength that now looked almost flawless. "Look at you." Megan smiled through tears that unexpectedly appeared. "You're ready. Time to fly." In the evening, returning home, Megan didn't go directly to her cabin. Instead, she turned onto a narrow dirt road that led to the top of a ridge, from which there was a panoramic view of the national park, a place she rarely visited, fearing the grandeur and openness of the space that seemed too overwhelming for her traumatized soul. "Today is release day," Megan said quietly, standing in front of the mirror in her cabin and fastening the official green uniform of the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. The last 2 weeks had passed in a whirlwind of activity. Preparing for Warrior's release required the efforts of the entire team, from final medical checks and installing the GPS tracker to determining the ideal location and coordinating with the local press. Megan ran her hand over the patch with the center's emblem, a soaring falcon. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Today, not only her patient was taking an important step, she was also beginning a new phase of her life. Yesterday, she had signed a contract with the Regional Wildlife Conservation Department for the position of coordinator of the Rapid Response Program for wildlife injuries. In a week, she would be moving to a small house closer to town. "Time to move forward," she told her reflection, trying to inject confidence into her voice that she didn't fully feel. Her phone rang. "Mia, are you ready?" she asked when Megan answered. "The press is already starting to gather, and Tyler is about to explode with excitement here." "On my way," Megan replied. "How's our star patient?" "Restless. I think he senses something is happening. Smart creatures, these birds." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Megan said, disconnecting. On the way to the center, she noticed with surprise how her view of the surrounding landscape had changed over these months. When she first arrived here, the mountains seemed silent witnesses to her pain, immense and indifferent. Now they had become friends, alive, and filled with secrets she was only beginning to understand. Megan met the eagle's eyes. In his amber eyes, she read something like recognition of the shared journey they had traveled together and the new paths that awaited them separately. "Thank you," she whispered to the bird, "for everything you've taught me." Then, gathering all her willpower, she raised her hands and released him. The moment when Warrior flew from her hands was forever etched in Megan's memory. His huge wings extended to full strength. The injured one equal to the healthy one, without any sign of weakness or hesitation. With a powerful stroke, the eagle rose into the air, and the entire audience froze in reverent awe. Warrior didn't fly away immediately. Instead, he made a wide circle above the clearing, gaining altitude with each wing beat. The sun's rays shone on his feathers, turning them to gold and bronze. As he flew directly over Megan's head, it seemed to her that he momentarily slowed, and she could have sworn that the eagle looked directly at her. "Goodbye, friend," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her from such a height. With a final, powerful thrust of his wings, the eagle sharply changed direction and headed toward the highest mountain peaks, his silhouette gradually diminishing against the bright blue sky until it became just a dot and then disappeared completely. The clearing filled with enthusiastic applause and shouts. People hugged each other, some even cried with emotion. Megan stood motionless, her hands still slightly raised, as if she could still feel the weight of the bird. "He flew perfectly," she heard Mia's voice beside her. "No asymmetry in wing movements, no signs of weakness. This is a complete recovery, Megan." "That was the best release I've seen in years," said Tyler, joining them, his face shining with pride. "GPS shows a stable signal," Jose reported, checking the tablet. "He continues to climb, direction north-northeast. Dr. Wilson was the last to approach, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "Excellent work, Megan. Just perfect." Journalists surrounded them, asking questions about the eagle, his chances of survival, the center's future plans. Megan answered automatically, her thoughts still with the bird disappearing into the sky. When the official part of the event concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Samantha approached her sister and hugged her. "That was incredible," she said. "I'm so proud of you, May." Megan hugged her sister back, finally allowing herself to feel the full range of emotions overwhelming her. "He flew, Sam," she whispered. "He really flew, just like you," Samantha replied, stepping back and looking into her eyes. "Maybe not so literally, but I see it. You're flying again, Megan." Later, when the equipment was packed up and the team was returning to the center, Megan separated from the group and climbed a small hill to take one last look at the sky. The GPS tracker showed that Warrior was already several miles away, confidently moving toward the northern ridges where a population of other golden eagles had been recorded. "Be careful out there," she whispered, "and live free." And then, as if in response, she saw a distant dot circling high above a mountain peak. Perhaps it was him, or maybe just another bird. But for Megan, it was a sign, a reminder that each flight, even after a fall, can lead to new heights. "Megan," Tyler called from afar, "we're ready to go." "Coming," she responded, taking one last look at the horizon before returning to her team, her new family, her new life. Returning to the center, Megan felt a strange mixture of sadness and elation. An important chapter of her life had ended, but another had begun, equally important, equally filled with meaning and possibilities. "You know," Dr. Wilson said as they approached the center, "sometimes I check data from GPS trackers of our released patients even years later, just to make sure they're still out there, flying free." "Do you think we'll be able to track Warrior for long?" Megan asked. "The tracker's battery is designed for 6 months," Dr. Wilson replied. "But the connection between you and him? That will last much longer." Megan nodded, understanding the depth of her mentor's words. Some connections don't need GPS trackers or physical presence. They live in memory, in the changes they brought, in the lessons they taught. And when Megan returned to her cabin that evening, under a starry night sky, she felt a new lightness in her heart, as if part of the heavy burden she had carried for so long now flew freely among the clouds, on the strong wings of a golden eagle. At the center, a small crowd had already gathered, the release of a golden eagle into the wild, a rare success story that local media couldn't miss. Megan noticed several TV vans and a group of photographers setting up equipment. "Megan!" Tyler called out, spotting her car. He waved his arm as if directing a plane for landing. "Hurry! Dr. Wilson wants to give a final briefing." She parked and, taking a deep breath, stepped out of the car to meet her future. Inside the center was controlled chaos. The center's staff bustled about, preparing everything for the ceremony. Dr. Wilson, today dressed in her best official uniform with all patches and badges, was giving final instructions to a group of volunteers. "Ah, Megan," she nodded, noticing her. "Right on time. Everything is ready for transportation. Jose is now conducting a final check of the tracker." "Nervous?" asked Mia, approaching and handing Megan protective gloves. "A bit," Megan admitted. "I've never conducted a release before." "Everything will be fine," Mia squeezed her shoulder. "Remember, today you're not just releasing a bird. You're celebrating a victory, his and your own." Jose appeared with a portable scanner in his hands. "The tracker is working perfectly. We'll be able to monitor him for the next 6 months until the battery dies." "Excellent," Dr. Wilson nodded. "Megan, are you ready to meet the press before the release? They need a brief background, and you know it better than anyone." "Yes," Megan replied, feeling her throat dry. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, even before the trauma. And now the thought of talking to a crowd of strangers brought anxiety. But this was part of her new job, and she was ready to try. Before going out to the press, Megan stopped by the special transport cage where Warrior was waiting. The eagle sat upright, more alert than usual. His eyes seemed to study everything around, sensing changes in routine. "This is your big day, friend," Megan said quietly. "We both knew it would come." The bird turned his head, meeting her gaze, and Megan felt again that strange connection that had formed between them over these months. "Are you ready to fly freely again, to show everyone what you're capable of?" She smiled lightly. "I know you're ready. You're the strongest warrior I've ever met." The eagle flapped his wings, as if agreeing, and Megan couldn't contain the emotions rising in her throat. "Now I understand why Dr. Wilson insists on not getting attached to patients," she whispered, trying to joke through moist eyes. "It's too painful saying goodbye." "Megan," Tyler's voice interrupted her monologue. "They're ready." Going out to the press, Megan saw that the crowd had significantly increased. Besides journalists, local residents, families with children, and tourists had gathered. Everyone wanted to witness the magnificent bird's return to the wild. Dr. Wilson, standing behind a small podium, introduced her. "And now I invite Megan Cortez, the head rehabilitation coordinator for Gaia 237. It's thanks to her dedication and professionalism that today's event has been made possible." Amid applause, Megan stepped onto the podium. The sun shone brightly, and for a moment she had to squint, surveying the sea of faces before her. Suddenly, she noticed a familiar face in the front rows. Her sister, Samantha, who had arrived last week and stayed specifically for this event, stood smiling broadly and giving thumbs up. This support gave Megan the strength to begin speaking. "Exactly 3 months ago, after a severe storm, I found an injured golden eagle on a trail near my home," she began, her voice gradually gaining confidence. "His wing was seriously injured, pinned under a broken branch. The chances for his full recovery were no more than 50%. She told Warrior's story, from the critical surgery to gradual physical therapy, from the first uncertain attempts to use his wing to full-fledged flights in the enclosure. She described his character, his will to live, his impatience to return to the sky. "Today we celebrate not just a successful medical procedure," she concluded, feeling her voice tremble with emotion. "We celebrate the victory of spirit over trauma, of freedom over constraint, of life over loss. Each broken bird we return to the sky reminds us that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds." Applause rippled through the crowd, and Megan saw Dr. Wilson nod approvingly from the side. At the director's signal, the center's team began preparations for the release itself. Warrior's transport cage was carefully moved to a truck, and a small convoy of 3 vehicles set out for the designated spot in the national park. The press and spectators followed, forming a long cortege. The chosen location was perfect, a spacious clearing on a highland surrounded by pines, with a view of the valley and mountains, a place from which the eagle could freely spread his wings and choose any direction of flight. "We're here," announced Dr. Wilson when they parked. "Let's get everything set up." Megan took charge of the final preparations, organizing the perimeter so that the press and spectators remained at a safe distance. Then, together with Tyler and Mia, She retrieved the transport cage from the truck. "Ready?" asked Dr. Wilson, approaching her with protective gloves. Megan nodded, though inside she felt a mix of joy, pride, and inexpressible sadness. This moment came so quickly. "It always seems that way," Dr. Wilson replied gently. "But remember, release is the goal of everything we do. Without this moment, all else would have no meaning." Before the release, Megan checked the GPS tracker one last time, discreetly secured with a special, lightweight attachment on the eagle's healthy wing. The device was designed to naturally fall off after a few months, after collecting sufficient data about the bird's adaptation to the wild. "Connect with the satellite," Megan told Jose, who held a tablet connected to the tracker. "Signal stable," he confirmed. "System active and ready." Dr. Wilson addressed the gathered spectators, briefly explaining the release procedure and asking them to maintain silence and not make sudden movements during the process. The moment of truth had arrived. Megan, in full protective gear, carefully opened the cage and extended her hands inside. Warrior, though always a challenging patient, this time allowed her to take him easily, as if understanding the importance of the situation. When she removed the eagle from the cage, the crowd gasped in awe. Sunlight glinted on the golden plumage of his head and neck, emphasizing the regal dignity of the bird. Megan held him firmly, but gently, aware that these were the last moments she would touch this amazing creature. "Cameras ready?" asked Dr. Wilson. All photographers and cameramen confirmed their readiness. "Megan," Dr. Wilson said softly, "when you're ready." November in Colorado brought the first real snow to the mountains. Megan stood by the window of her new apartment, watching as white flakes slowly descended to the ground, transforming the city into a Christmas card long before the holidays. 6 months had passed since Warrior's release. 6 months of significant changes. "Coffee's ready," Samantha called from the kitchen. Her older sister, who was supposed to return to Chicago after her first visit, ultimately decided to take extended remote work and now lived with Megan, at least for a few months. "Coming," Megan replied, lingering a moment longer to gaze at the snow-covered mountains before turning away from the window. Their shared apartment in Lakeside was larger and brighter than Megan's former cabin. Located closer to the city, it provided convenient access to her new job at the Regional Wildlife Conservation Department, yet was still close enough to the mountains to feel their presence. "Important day today, right?" Samantha asked, handing her sister a cup of coffee. Megan nodded, sitting down at the kitchen table. "The last data from the GPS tracker. The battery should die any day now." "And you're worried?" It wasn't a question. "A little," Megan admitted. "Silly, isn't it? Knowing the last coordinates or not won't change anything for him. He's been living his own life for a long time." "But it matters to you," Samantha said gently. "And that's okay. He was your first patient, your turning point." Megan smiled, grateful for her sister's understanding. 6 months of tracking Warrior had shown excellent adaptation of the eagle to the wild. The tracker recorded his movements in the northern ridges, where he eventually joined a small group of golden eagles. "A week ago, I received a letter," Megan suddenly said, "from Jason." Samantha froze. Jason was Megan's fellow medic, the only one who survived along with her in that fatal attack that left her with PTSD. "What does he write?" Samantha asked carefully. "He's creating a medical program for veterans in Montana. Wants me to join the consulting team. Not full-time, just consultations a few times a month." "And what did you reply?" Megan turned to her sister, her face calm and determined. I said yes. It's time to stop running from the past. Time to use it to help others. Samantha hugged her, and they stood that way for some time, two sisters under the starry Colorado sky. Remember what you told me on the first day when I arrived? Samantha asked. Something about the terrible kitchen utensils in the cabin? Megan joked. No, Samantha laughed. You said, I'm not okay, but I'm getting better. I think now you could say something different. Megan thought, looking at the mountains, at the stars, at all her new life. I'm okay, she finally said, and I continue to get better. The next morning, Megan woke up early. She dressed for a run, despite the snow and cold. On the table, she left a note for Samantha. Went for a run, then going to the center to help with a new admission. We'll be back for dinner. Love you, M. She ran out into the fresh air, feeling the snow crunch beneath her feet. Running along the familiar route to a small park with a view of the mountains, she looked up and saw something that made her stop. High in the sky, against the morning sun, circled a large bird of prey, a golden eagle. Of course, she couldn't be sure it was Warrior. More likely, it was just one of many raptors that inhabit these mountains. But Megan chose to believe that in this moment, their paths crossed again. For a moment, for one glance between sky and earth. A sign that they had both found their place in the world, their sky to fly in, their freedom from past wounds. Fly high, friend, she whispered, watching as the bird made a wide circle and disappeared behind the mountain ridge. Fly high. And with fresh energy, she continued her run, moving forward to a new day, new challenges, a new chance to spread her own wings and rise above everything that once held her back. In her thoughts, she saw not only the eagle disappearing into the sky, but also the woman who once stood trembling on a threshold of the rehabilitation center with an injured bird in her arms. Frightened, lonely, broken. That woman had now become part of history, a page of a turned chapter. Ahead lay a new story, a story of healing and service, of connection with nature and people, of the courage to fly even after falling. A story for which she needed only two things, hope and wings. And now she had both. Is the team from the center coming? For the final data reading? Samantha asked, serving breakfast on plates. Yes, they'll be here around 11, Megan replied. Dr. Wilson, Mia, and Tyler. Jose couldn't make it. He returned to university last month. Dr. Wilson had suggested making this a small ceremony, the last official chapter of Warrior's story, as she called it. And although Megan no longer worked at the center daily, the connection with the team remained strong. The doorbell rang, earlier than expected. I'll get it, said Samantha, standing up. But when she opened the door, it wasn't someone from the center team, but David Santiago, Megan's supervisor at the Rapid Response Program. Sorry for the early intrusion, he said, stepping inside and shaking snow from his coat. But we have a situation with a young mountain lion caught in a poacher's trap near Watson Creek. We need your expertise, Megan. Megan had already risen, automatically switching to work mode. How serious? Tissue rupture? Bleeding? The ranger who found her says the leg injury is significant, but not critical if help is provided quickly, Santiago replied. The problem is that the area is difficult to access due to the snowfall. We'll have to use snowmobiles. Megan nodded, mentally going through the necessary equipment for such an operation. Megan, Samantha gently reminded. The center team, remember? Megan hesitated. Today's meeting had been planned for weeks. The last data from Warrior's Tracker, the last symbolic farewell. Santiago, understanding the situation, quickly said, I can contact the team from Denver, but it will take them at least 3 hours to get there. 3 hours for an injured mountain lion in a trap, in the cold, possibly with predators nearby. Megan knew this could mean the difference between life and death. Unexpectedly, even to herself, she laughed. "What?" Santiago looked at her in surprise. "Just thinking that Warrior would probably understand," she replied. "Sam, can you tell Dr. Wilson I have an emergency call? Offer them to still use the apartment for the meeting. I'll try to get back as soon as possible." "Are you sure?" Samantha asked. Megan looked out the window at the snowy peaks for a second, somewhere among which a once-injured eagle flew. "Absolutely. This is exactly what he taught me, to keep moving forward." Within half an hour, Megan was fully equipped in a rescue jeep, making its way through snowy roads to Watson Creek. Her backpack was stocked with everything necessary for first aid to large predators, and her mind was focused on the upcoming operation. Santiago drove the car confidently, despite the worsening weather. "You know," he said after a long silence, "when we were looking for someone for this position, I wasn't sure a military medic would be the right choice. Now I see I was wrong." Megan raised an eyebrow. "What changed your mind?" "Your ability to work in crisis situations. The rest of the team might be panicking, but you remain calm, focused. It's a rare gift." Megan thought about the long journey she had traveled over these months. From a woman who flinched at every loud sound to a coordinator leading a team in the most difficult situations. "I had a good teacher," she simply replied. "Dr. Wilson?" Santiago guessed. "Yes," Megan smiled. "Her too. The young mountain lion rescue procedure was successful, although it took longer than expected. When Megan finally returned to her apartment, it was already late. But to her surprise, the entire center team was still there, along with Samantha. Around the kitchen table with a laptop. "Sorry I'm so late," Megan said, removing her jacket covered in melted snow. "How's the mountain lion?" Dr. Wilson immediately asked. "Stable. We transported her to the county shelter for further treatment. The injuries are significant, but she's young and strong. Good chances for full recovery." "Another patient on the path to freedom," Mia smiled. "We waited for you for the final data review." "You waited all day?" Megan was surprised. "Of course," Tyler nodded. "This is our joint project, our shared success. Besides, Dr. Wilson prepared a surprise." Megan moved closer, and Dr. Wilson turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a map with markers showing the 6-month journey of Warrior. "Here's the latest data received yesterday," Dr. Wilson said, pointing to the newest point on the map. "He's in the northern part of the ridge, in an area known for having the highest concentration of golden eagles. And look here," she zoomed in, showing the pattern of movements over the last month. "He's established a clear territory. This is typical behavior for an adult male preparing to form a pair." "He's found a home," Megan said quietly, examining the map. "And more," Dr. Wilson said. Wilson clicked on another tab, showing a series of photographs. "This is the surprise Tyler mentioned. I contacted a group of wildlife researchers working in that area. They set up camera traps to observe the raptor population." Megan held her breath, looking at the images. They showed a golden eagle descending to a stream, majestic, strong, with a characteristic mark at the end of the right wing where the GPS tracker once was. "Warrior," she whispered, "without a doubt." Dr. Wilson confirmed. "Comparative analysis confirms that this is indeed Gaia 237. The photos were taken last week. He's in excellent shape, Megan, flying perfectly. No signs of former injury." Megan couldn't take her eyes off the photographs, feeling tears welling up. Seeing him like this, free, strong, wild, was the best conclusion to this story. Not only that, Mia interjected. Look at the last frames. In the next photos, Warrior wasn't alone. Beside him, on a neighboring branch, sat a female golden eagle, slightly smaller, but just as elegant. Oh, Megan exhaled, unable to suppress a smile. He has a mate. Seems so, Dr. Wilson nodded. And if all goes well, they might have offspring in the spring. Full circle, Megan said quietly. Exactly, Dr. Wilson raised a glass of wine, which, Megan now noticed, stood before each person. To the full circle, to Warrior and his new life. And to Megan, Samantha added, raising her glass, to her new life as well. They clinked glasses, and Megan felt deep gratitude for these people who had become her new family, for the journey she had traveled, for the lessons she had learned. Later that evening, when everyone had left, Megan stood on the small balcony of her apartment, looking at the starry sky. The snow had stopped, and the night air was crystal clear, cold, and refreshing. You know, he really changed my life, she said to Samantha, who had come out to her with a blanket. Strange, isn't it? One injured bird. Not strange, Samantha replied, draping the blanket over her sister's shoulders. Healing often comes from the most unexpected sources. Megan nodded, her gaze wandering from the stars to the dark silhouettes of mountains. Somewhere there, in the night sky, Warrior was perhaps circling with his new mate, free from the constraints of his past.